we train people when they join organisations, and when they get to the dizzy heights of leadership, we'll invest in them. But in the middle, that kind of sticky middle, as I call it, it's like Darwin, like survival of the fittest. Good luck with that.
This is a golden nugget. I think for me, I've used this so recently, so many times, and trying to think of that analogy in my brain is to think, okay, I need to go and have this difficult conversation. How am I going to deal with that?
That's why conversations, curiosity, compassion are all really critical in the work, in the toolkit of a safety leader. But they're not necessarily skills. They're more about,
understanding.
Treat yourself with compassion and recognise what you have capacity for. Growth is difficult. The work is difficult. It takes energy. So you've got to kind of be in the right place to do that.
The next kind of concept I want to delve into a little bit, and I think it ties into what makes great leaders execute to good leaders, is that I think a lot of the research and literature suggests that trust in leadership is a really critical attribute to unlocking organisational performance and unlocking people's capability. Do you want to talk to us a little about the trust equation?
It's my fave.
All right, welcome to another episode of The Art of Safety Leadership. We've got a couple of awesome guests on today's episode, and today we're going to be talking about leadership. In particular, we're going to be talking about self-awareness, why it's such an important ingredient to leadership, and why it's so important particularly in safety leadership. And secondly, some practical tips, tools based on your wisdom and experience for how we can work on it within ourselves to keep improving. So on the couch today, I've got two awesome guests. We've got Anna Keane, 20 years experience, leadership coaching, particularly with a specialisation working with safety professionals, has worked with senior safety professionals from the likes of Amazon, Netflix, large companies, and also we've got Liam Simpson, Director of Health, Safety, Wellbeing for Wilson James, major player, 5,000 staff, running around doing security, construction, logistics and aviation services. So welcome along.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. All right, so maybe start with Anna. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and where this all fits for you, and how you got into leadership and into this particular domain?
Yeah, happy to. So I've had the joy of working alongside the safety, environment, sustainability professions now for about 20 years, terrifyingly. The first 10 years or so of that was in the wonderful world of recruitment, and always just working with those disciplines, and was always really curious about kind of how people made impact in the work they do. I love working with impact-led professionals, so whether you're passionate about people or planet. And then about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago now, having spent some time over in Australia, I started to get really curious and concerned about the fact that this group of professionals that were really like morally driven, that had like big jobs to do, protect our planet, protect our people, like what?
Not small things.
Yeah. Were just not being given the space or the development to really allow them to be like really effective and impactful in their roles. Yep. So it was much more about kind of here's your qualifications, here's your certificates, but actually little time or support given to the non-technical part.
Yep.
So that's where I spent the last 10 years. It's been a wild ride, and it's joy, like absolute joyful work, watching people kind of really step into their leadership with that real authenticity, but like their ability to make real impact in the work they do. So I spend much of my days coaching people like Liam, people across incredible organisations across the globe, but really with that focus of supporting them to make difference.
Brilliant. Oh, that's awesome. And over that 20 years, I'm sure you've accumulated so many war stories. One of the things we talk about is wisdom and war stories on the pod. And we're going to have some crackers, I'm sure, from you
like
today.
A magpie. I still, with absolute pride, I can't always quote where it came from, but there's loads of good stuff.
Nothing will be attributed.
Yeah.
And Liam, tell us about your background, because I think 11 years in the British Army early on, and sort of a really successful career so far, as a safety professional in the leadership sort of side of things.
Yeah, thanks. And like you said, war story is probably an intentional comment. My background, born through the military, joined as a sort of junior soldier and sort of quickly went through the ranks. I think just in the term where the British Army are in terms of core values, discipline, integrity, really a sentiment into leading me naturally, I would say, probably into the safety profession. Got stuck into the safety profession around 11, 12 years ago, working overseas, and from there working with multinational companies, and just thinking about how they behave, how they think differently in terms of their mindset. And we've all got a value for being a safety professional, that we want to improve work-life balance, safety in the workplace. And I think just through those bits, I think led me to where we are today.
Awesome. So just to pick up on that a little bit around, one of the themes for today is around self-awareness, right? And so just starting off with Liam, maybe around, have you been able to tap into your own background? Sounds like something around the military days that really inspired you to want to take a role in not only safety, but actually pursue a leadership role in the industry?
Yeah, I think when you think back to some of the incidents, I won't go into any detail, but I think if you think back of a couple of incidents or what could lead and what happens in the military, when we go on operational tours, there's a number of incidences that have led me to think, well, how can we, for the betterment of leadership, improve organisations through them core skills? I think for me, a couple of things that stand out is around role modelling and expectations in terms of delivery, and how that then feeds into leadership for people then to follow up behind you.
Yeah, brilliant. It's not an uncommon scenario from a lot of the military folks, and there are a lot in the industry that come through. But those really core values that you just get through that exposure, that experience, and what are some pretty challenging conditions at times in that industry. There's such a natural affiliation and affliction into the safety industry. All right, so we might come to Anna now and just get a little bit deeper under the bonnet here, a little bit about your background. So what inspired you? What were the influences that got you into the pathway you've taken around, what is quite a niche around leadership coaching, particularly in the safety and sustainability space?
So I think after having this kind of realisation that there was a development gap, I'll be really honest, I was moving back to the UK. I didn't want to go back into recruitment. So I was like, well, it's now or never. Let's just give this thing a go. And I'd done some work on profiling in Australia when I was there. So I set about doing a piece of work where I interviewed a load of leaders in health and safety and asked them what were the competencies that were critical for success, the non-technical.
Yep.
And that kind of formed the basis of what we did in frameworks. It was, we profiled people against it, and we could help them identify their development needs, like where their strengths were, but where their development areas were. And it was when I was working with a client, it was John Green in his time in Lang O'Rourke, and I'd done a bit of profiling work with his team, and he turned around to me after we'd done the bit of work and was like, okay, now what are you going to do about it? And I was like, what do you mean? Yeah.
Now what?
You've told them what they're not great at. And I'm like, what are you going to do about it? And I was like, well, I've coached and trained in my role in recruitment. I've done some development work. Let's give it a go. And I went off and did my training, and I started working. And one of the first team members, and I still laugh with this person about it now, sat down and was like, okay, what are you going to teach me, Anna? And I was like, I'm not going to teach you anything. Like, if that's what you've come, I'm not going to tell you how to do your job better. Yeah. I'm just going to ask you some questions. And I think for the first time in my career, I felt like I'd really found a place where I didn't have to necessarily have the answers. But I could really support people's development. I could give them space and time. I could help them see the patterns they were in. I could get everything out of their heads and support and enable them to be more effective in the roles they do. So it became like a real love. And, we built frameworks over 10 years, and I just got further and further away from that work. You end up looking at spreadsheets, having meetings, hiring people, having performance, all the stuff. But actually what I loved doing was the development work. Was sitting down with someone and saying, okay, this is an hour for you. Take a breath. Let's look at what you want to do.
Yeah. So. Love it. Love the passion in there as well. You can feel it in your voice. It's pretty cool.
It's a privilege.
Yeah. So what is it then about, people like Liam here who come and knock on your door and sort of are really, curious and keen to sort of progress up the developmental pathway in this area? What are some of the kind of common characteristics or patterns that you see in those people? What are they really looking for, do you think?
The word that I always come back to is the word stuck.
Yep.
Like, there is either a sense of maybe they've stepped into a new role and the toolkit they've developed to do the last one isn't serving them. Yep. Maybe they're trying to make change, but it's not as effective as it might have been. Maybe they're feeling like they're at a crossroads in their career. So there's usually this kind of underlying sense of, I've tried everything I've got, but I need some support. This sense of overwhelm, this busyness. I think coaching is one of those socially acceptable places to take a pause, take a breath,
Yeah.
and to think. And I'm sure we'll get into that, but that is so important, especially within leadership, balancing the doing and the thinking.
Yeah.
And I think often it's allowing themselves to take that time to have some thought partnership. I tend to call it more development partnering. I tend to play with like coaching, a little bit of learning, a little bit of mentoring. Like, here's some stuff. Let's just see what you need in order to get unstuck.
Yeah, awesome. Nice little.
It's where she
Auntie
came
Treacle
from,
plate.
but it's where she came from. This,
Nice little plate
yeah,
there for the pod.
And this kind of sensation of like feeling stuck, but also the sticky middle, that part in your career where you go from being really good at doing and then someone recognizes it and suddenly you've got to lead others.
Yep.
And there's a whole identity crisis. Success looks different. Skills need to be different.
Yep.
And that's where Auntie Treacle came from, was we just kept meeting people. And I think it's where you need a little extra advice.
Love it. Nicely done.
Thanks.
And you can see it. And it's not just necessarily the safety profession where this happens. You know, people come in, they're on the tools, doing the technical work. The best technical people end up getting promoted into managerial and leadership roles without necessarily having the development provided to be able to do that. And all of a sudden they're in a position where they're trying to drive significant outcomes for organisations without necessarily that set of competencies and capabilities unlocked, right?
It's like we go back into this. So we train people when they join organisations, and when they get to the dizzy heights of leadership, we'll invest in them. But in the middle, that kind of sticky middle, as I call it,
kick them out.
It's like Darwin, like survival of the fittest. Good luck with that.
Yep.
And then we wonder why they fail, but they also fail upwards and to everyone working for them.
Yep.
So I just think for most organisations, it's where we should be investing more money, like more time.
And you can kind of see systemically that that's going to churn out some of the best capability or best potential in organisations, because we're just putting more onto the capable ones until they break, and then they break and they're gone.
Because we haven't given them the tools.
Yep.
Because you do need different techniques, different skills, different insight at this level than you did to be successful doing the job.
So that's a great takeaway. We've already reached our first goal one there for some of our CEOs, our executives that listen to this, that are in the non-technical side of safety leadership, about thinking about the talent that you're bringing through and what support you're providing that talent to unlock their potential and support them to develop, rather than just loading them up and expecting their technical expertise to support them in a leadership role.
And also, how do we, like at that stage of career, give people choice? Because we tell people the only way really to progress into organisations is to lead teams, but some people just want to do a great job, and that's okay as well. And that's great. Yeah. We don't design organisations to allow for that.
Coming now to you, Liam. So hearing that from Anna, and reflect on your own journey. Obviously, you're in a leadership role, a safety leadership role with Wilson James. And you've obviously come in with a really strong set of technical risk expertise, but you're embarking on the development to really unlock your potential with working with someone like Anna. So from a self-awareness perspective, what are the things that you reflected on in yourself to seek out that support and seek out that developmental opportunity?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the key bits around that was around vulnerability. Apprehension of, somebody coming from the military, that status, alpha male, moving into that leadership role, trying to accept that there's vulnerability in there is, you need to be open to that. And I think reflecting back on what's happened, in terms of the coaching with Anna over the last sort of 6 to 12 months, I think it's just opened up a new perspective. For me now, I look at vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness. And in a leadership role, it's not all about having the answers. I think thinking back to my early days, looking at what a good leader looks like to me, is bringing everybody on that journey with you. So if we're enabling to do that and accept that not always you're going to have the right answers for everything, but you've grown a great team around you to be able to elevate either individuals or the team collectively, or even in organisations, I think that turns then into a strength. And how we then can implement that effectively across organisations to improve performance, improve culture, I think is a really important piece.
Yeah, well said. And so within that, there'll be a bunch of people out there listening who are safety professionals and looking to graduate up that developmental curve using some of these non-technical skills. And in doing that, I'm sure, and reflecting on your own journey, that'll stimulate a degree of anxiety and a bit of uncertainty. Can you reflect on that a little bit in terms of your own journey? What were the things that you were uneasy about, or that sort of gave that little bit of a heart flutter or a bit of anxiety around the development? Like, did you have any fears, for example, or things that you were really concerned about in terms of revealing about yourself as part of that process?
I think you mentioned it around the technical ability. So credibility in that space stands up. You've gone through that educational academia journey, and you then have that credibility from a technical perspective to position yourself in a way of a leadership role that may come available. I think the other aspect of that is to really become curious around those next steps.
Yep.
And rather than the technical aspects of a leadership role, understanding more the soft skills. So how do we interact? How do we be more curious with people around you who are not technically have the same credibility in a safety leadership role, and what the expectations are of that. So I think just understanding individuals on a more personal basis leads to further success down the line.
Well, that's really interesting. So obviously, so you had real comfort around those technical strengths. So you had that technical credibility. What were the areas where you felt quite uncertain or concerned that we maybe had some gaps, or did you not see those gaps, or tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think stepping into or seeing a leadership role as a potential in the future was something that when I look back on, I think, yeah, that needs to be something that I need to strive for in the future, because I've got that technical expertise and that credibility. I think one of the things as a safety professional, certainly that I've learned over the last 10 to 12 years, is that all that means nothing. You've got to continue to evolve.
Yep.
I always label safety as that there's no checkered flag, because year on year there's an expectation, it's evolving, there's new technologies out there, and I think back to the traditional methods of what a safety professional look like is not that of a safety professional today.
Yep.
And evolving into that space, whether we're looking at data, we're looking at the elements, how much tech is now involved in being a safety professional is huge.
AI, massive.
I mean, it's incredible. So we've got to be really curious, open to explore new learnings, and if we put barriers in place, that's when you create bureaucracy across organisation. So being open to exploring and learning new ways of working is a key attribute I see for safety professionals in the future.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the role of a modern safety leader is vast, right? It's broad. It's deep understanding of risk fundamentals, right? That you can't escape that. That's pretty fundamental. Then you overlay that with data, technology, AI, digitization. That's critical, mission critical nowadays to have in there. Wrap all that around these beautiful things called the non-technical skills around identifying and influencing stakeholders, trust, all these critical skills that if you don't have one part of that puzzle, your overall ability to make an impact is compromised. So coming back to Anna, because this really ties into what you're about and the work that you're doing out there, working with people like Liam who've come in with a really strong, robust technical skill set. Sure, maybe developing more in the technology and AI and that sort of side of it, but really it's around trying to have that presence in with those key stakeholders, right?
Yeah, and it's so, like you just started to both talk about this like complexity of the work, right? It's not 1 + 1 = 2. We're dealing with humans, we're dealing with organisations that are changing, we're dealing with tech that's changing, and the professionals, the leaders' ability to understand the context that they're operating in, understand themselves, and then show up with, whether it's with an individual or in a certain scenario or in the work, and be able to adapt within that based on that understanding of self and understanding of context. And I think that's really, like all the work I do with people around influence and how do you actually create change within organisations comes down to relationships. It comes down to the relationship you have with yourself and what you project and what you tell yourself and the stories we tell ourselves, which is, like, if we digress for a moment, it's why when we talk about non-technical skills, I get a bit like, we treat them as things we have to learn, but it's so much more about the lens in which we see the world. And I think that's been my learning over the last few years, is actually we all see the world in a very different way. What gets us out of bed in the morning, what keeps us awake at night. And our ability to recognise we see the world in a way, and it's based on everything that's got us to where we are today, but we have the ability to start shaping and playing with that lens.
Yep.
When it comes to influencing others, we need to appreciate that they all have a different lens. So we're interacting with people that see the world in a completely different... That's why conversations, curiosity, compassion are all really critical in the work, in the toolkit of a safety leader, but they're not necessarily skills. They're more about,
understanding.
Yeah, understanding
awareness.
of self,
Yep.
like that interiority, that emotional intelligence, and how we interact with other people. So, and I think that's often, we might start with talking about how you influence the senior stakeholder. But if you're trapped in being right, knowing and having that like credibility, like I know the answer, I've got the qualifications, you're never going to be really curious with someone. If you're really like, well, I'm right, you're wrong. Like you're never going to seek to understand their perspective. So a lot of the work we have to do is really unpack and unpick at a really deep rooted level around what are the beliefs we've got, what's the narrative we like carry, like all of that good stuff. So like, I've spent many a time with therapists in my life. It's not going back into where it came from, but it's like, how is that showing up for you now? And how can you really start to think about your growth, your development in that way, rather than just acquiring how to, use your voice and your tone and ask questions.
Love it.
I think
we're getting to the meat of this now, which is really, really cool. It's kind of like, it's almost a bit of a journey of enlightenment, really. For want of a better term. I had one of my role models, a good friend of mine, a guy called Trevor Hendy, an Australian surf lifesaver, once explained it to me. He's became a bit of a life coach, and he explained it to me as around, I'm there trying to send you a message. But what I can't see is that you were once born into the world and you had no conditioning, no influence on you whatsoever. And then all these little things start to happen in life. You have experiences, you have relationships, you have things don't go well, things do go well. All these little accumulation of these little hurts, if you like, they just accumulate inside someone from day one. And until you recognise you've got that going on inside you, it's really hard to try and understand who you're trying to engage with, which is sort of what you're,
and I
where
think
you're coming from.
That was my biggest leadership level, like lesson,
Epiphany.
was like really starting to understand that I was reacting to situations with all of this kind of baggage, triggers, whatever words you want to use, and I was reacting, not responding. And I think that's really important as a leader, to create that space in between something happening and the adult to adult, where you deal with it, but you've got to kind of get everything out and have a good look at it to do that.
Exactly, and that's quite confronting.
Right? Like it's work. Like that's why they call it work, like because it does, and it's a practice. It's not 6 sessions. I mean, Liam knows this is not 6 sessions and you're cured. This is like a lifetime work. It's infinite, like safety. So
because without it, you've got, say, putting this into a practical lens in our industry, you've got a CEO, sitting there with the executive team, and as a safety leader, the safety professional, you're there and you're trying to express a message, you're trying to influence to get a certain outcome or stimulate a certain level of awareness with the group so that you can achieve an outcome. And if you haven't kind of gone on that journey to discover, you've got physical messages being transmitted, but all that stuff we were just talking about is like noise that sits in the ether between the two people trying to converse, and it disrupts the intended message. Right. And so I feel like I'm saying something to you or saying something to you, but it's actually been received as something completely different, which then has a major impact on our ability to get it done. Right.
But I think just to touch on that, and Anna will never be out of work. I think typically,
I'll never be out of therapy and my own coaching either. Though, so
I say that because typically, in the, from my own experience, and I share that, and I think I share that for quite a lot of safety professionals, whether they're a leader or not. Sometimes we take a lot of emotion from that technical credibility point of view. We take a lot of emotion into those conversations, and me and Anna have shared a couple of them between ourselves, and it's really key. You was touching on it then around body language, and we experience that day in, day out, whether it's a safety professional or not. Just walking around general offices, you can gauge body language from individuals, but more importantly, when you're trying to deliver a safety critical message or make execs aware of what may be happening out there, it's really hard to balance. You know, it's not an easy fix, and it will continue to evolve and develop, but it's really difficult and skill to be mindful of the body language, but also of the emotion of how it's being put across.
Yeah, absolutely. We've really delved into like this concept of self-awareness, and I think people have a good understanding of what we're talking about there. The hard bit, of course, then is if you're the next Liam Simpson out there in the ether listening to this podcast and thinking about, gee, there's something really powerful in going on this journey of self-awareness. Where do I start? How do I do it? I'll start off with Anna.
Okay. So I think there's a few things you can do. I think starting to get really curious and building a practice of reflection is really important. And reflection, like on like what's going well, what's not going well, what are you going to do differently? That kind of practice, starting to really think about like what are you good at? What are you passionate about? What's the impact you want to make? I think starting to really consider like why do you want to be in these roles? Like
what's driving you?
What's driving you? Is it like societal pressure? Is it actually that you want to make more impact? Is it like, let's be honest, income, ego, all of those things. But like get really clear on why you want to, because this, like we've been saying, isn't easy work. So you've like to make it happen, make it matter. Like, why do you want to go on this journey? But I think that starting to get really introspective, starting to recognize the stories you tell yourself. I love playing with, and Liam will know, like the difference between fact and story. Like fact is something a video camera can record. Story is everything we tell ourselves. We need to get really curious about what are the stories we tell ourselves. So there's that kind of introspection work. I think there are a million different free psychometrics out there. Like go and profile the hell out of yourself, but don't use it as like, this is who I am and who I ever will be. Like I'm not a huge fan of color coding people. It's a starting point. It's a data point in your development, in your growth. You can choose what you want, like where you want to grow, where you want to develop. And then the other thing that I always encourage people to do, and we did it as part of the process, is like capture feedback. Go and ask the people. Like it's really if you say I'm working on my growth, my development, tell me what I'm great at, and tell me I'd be like, what would be even better that I could do? I'd be even better at doing this job if I get them to finish like just one little nugget like that. But too often we get awkward about asking those things. I run a female leadership program. We get everyone to go and ask for the 5 words that people would use to describe. And they're blown away by the nice things people say about them. But it gives you a starting point. And I think that starting point, and then what feels important to you? What feels important to your work? Get that kind of focus. I'm really happy to share the framework that we built. Like, I would open source it day in, day out for people to kind of go, okay, this is what's important. Where am I? Like, and I just think those exercises of self-reflection, the capturing feedback, the using tools, just going and getting curious is a really nice starting place that anyone can access.
I think, do you think there's any kind of caution or sort of safety net type aspects of this exercise that people need to be aware of as they go on the journey? Because I know even just in my own leadership development, when you really get introspective and you really get deep, it can be quite scary, some of the stuff you actually unearth. Thoughts on that?
Treat yourself with compassion and recognize what you have capacity for. Right? I've had 2 kids. If you ask me to go on a growth journey, those like 2 years after having them, no, right? We grow, just couldn't even, like getting dressed was like absolute achievement. But this whole thing of like, we grow at different paces at different points. So recognize where you are. What's your capacity like? If you are really struggling, you might need to go and get some help to get okay again, to then do the work. And that's okay. Sometimes when I do meet people and they are in this deep state of stuck, actually they need to go and like rest, regroup, recharge, maybe get some additional support, maybe take some time out before, because growth is difficult, the work is difficult, this is all, it takes energy. So you've got to kind of be in the right place to do that. So absolutely, if you're already feeling burnt out, exhausted, don't try and stretch yourself. Look after yourself first.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, you're in your role with Orson James, in a big organisation, a lot going on, a lot of responsibility, a lot of accountability. that no matter how good you are, that weighs on a person's sort of soul, really, because you care. How does that? What's your sort of journey been like around handling some of those challenges as you've accumulated responsibility in your career?
Just to echo what Anna said then around kind of pacing change.
Yep.
Pacing change is really important. I think of myself this time last year, my capacity, I was at almost capacity. I was being asked to do more.
Yep.
But I think it was an important point where I took some self-reflection in that moment to think, can I do this? Or am I going to be turning up, or can I show up to this, this request and deliver on the expectations of what they're asking me to do? And at that moment, it was a decision not to move forward with.
Yep.
I think earlier on, and then that's come back around this year.
Yep.
Okay, we can do that. We've balanced the capacity and able to show up and deliver in that space. So I think it's really important to try and balance what's being asked of you as an individual. Don't feel pressured about it either. You don't need to be afraid to say no. I think that's a really tough thing to do, and I still struggle with it today, to be able to turn around and say, no, actually, I need to take a breath. We'll do this next week, not tomorrow. So I think to be able to have that in the back of your mind as it's okay to be able to deliver that message, do it in the right way, make sure it comes across that way. But I think that's really important.
Yeah, great point. Fully my own experience, I fully agree. It's a real challenge, particularly I think for people who do have leadership aspirations and who are moving up that pathway. They generally have a higher bandwidth to take things on, and inside a business or an organisation, it's inevitable that the higher ups, the executives, are looking for those people, and they see them, and so they start throwing stuff at them because they trust that the person's got the aptitude to do it. But in the absence of having the type of maturity that you've just described to be able to, and the self-awareness to be able to reflect on it, to kind of say, hang on, I'm at my red line or close to it. Actually, it makes a lot more sense for me to, with respect, take an extra year to get where I want to go than to blow up in 6 weeks and then potentially take a big backward step, right?
And I think just the aspect of reflection, I'm learning that continuously.
Yep.
I don't think you'll ever stop learning around reflection.
Yep.
How does it grow? I think some of the things a couple of takeaways for me is, at the end of the day, have I had positive impact today? At the end of the week, how productive have I been? I wasn't so productive there. That didn't go so well. Okay, how do we look at that? And then how do we flip it to be a positive maybe next week or the next time that comes back around? So I think the reflection point is really important. And also to understand, for me, what's important. Why am I in this profession?
Yep.
What do I want to do? How do I want to make a difference? I think for me, from shaped through kind of my military days, I just have a deep rooted core to care for people, whether that's personally or professionally. And I think if you can where these humans involved, if you can show up and care rather than instruction and rules, then that has a greater impact for leaders, whether you're in safety or not.
So you mentioned another little grab there that is a really practical thing that anyone can use out there that's listening to this pod, around a simple little checking in with yourself. Am I turning up or am I showing up? Do you want to explain that just a little bit more for people out there so they know exactly what you mean? I'll get a comment from both of you on this one, Liam.
I think this comes back to very early days of being a young lad and having a really robust dad.
Yep.
He used to always say, work hard, work hard, work hard, all the time.
Yeah.
When you play, if I was in sport, make sure you show up.
Yeah, don't do anything by halves.
I want 100%, and that's all he used to say to me all the time.
I think it's generational.
Pardon?
It sounds very generational.
Yeah, absolutely. But I've taken that as well, and that's some of the key messages I have today with my two kids. Yep. We kind of changed the narrative a little bit. An example of that for my lad, it's work hard, fight easy. He's into boxing, and he really, at the beginning when I was saying it to him, he'd say, "Dad," But now he's took it on board, and every time he steps out of the car or he's going into the gym, we'll look at each other and we'll share that line between ourselves, which I just think is a really key message. And the same with my daughter, we have the same kind of conversations, which I think are really important.
Anna, what does that sort of strapline or mantra kind of mean to you?
I think for me, it's recognizing kind of where you're at and what energy you've got to give something, and sitting in conscious choice, not reaction.
Yes.
Right. Like I was doing some work recently and with a client, and I often use the analogy of being a hamster on a wheel. I think it's kind of like the only thing we have in our locker is like to go faster, and we're just now and next. And this whole thing around showing up for me is being really self-aware, really in conscious choice, really choosing actually what have I got to give right now? What do I need? And how do I can I show up? And if you can't, being honest with yourself and others around you. And I think that leans into the point earlier about vulnerability. Often that can feel like a risk. Or what happens if they think I'm not good enough? What happens if they think I'm not, like if I'm failing? What happens if they overlook me for something later down the line? I guarantee you that actually if you can have those kinds of conversations with other people and you have that level of self-awareness of yourself, it will serve you better than just saying yes all the time.
100%. And the taking a step back from that, you know, it's such a human mindset to lean on. You know, we think about the things that we fear we're not good enough at or not good enough for. But we can't see, you know, if there's 100 things and we're good at 95 of them, we forget about the 95 and focus everything on the 5 and freak out about it, you know. Whereas if I've got talent in my business or in life, you know, if someone's good at 95% of what they do, that's what an amazing proposition, you know.
I mean, one of the lines that I use with people all the time is like 70% in academia is a first. Like if you're cracking out 70% on a daily basis, like in the world of academia, you would be like smashing it out of the park. So sometimes there's a conditioning, our obsession with being busy, our obsession with doing is, I mean, I've definitely felt the detriment of that. I think that kind of, whether it's an actual parent or your critical parent voice is, you know, it's the things that drives you. It'll be the reason you are where you are. But it's keeping it constructive rather than destructive.
Yeah, 100%.
I think touching on that, prioritization is key. If we can't prioritize, you feel like you're just drowning. And you know, everybody, you know, in some aspects, some weeks, everybody may want a piece of you. You just have to be able to say, hang on a minute, I can do this, but I'm unable to do that. But we can maybe look at it, you know, another time. I think the other bit for me that came out of that then was, back in the day, you used to always say, jack of all trades, master of none.
Yes.
And for me, as a attribute of a leader, if we, and I think I said it earlier around, if we can get to grips with and be okay with us not knowing everything, you know, accepting failure in the right way, I think is another important piece. I think they're really key strands that you can latch onto and leverage as you go through the leadership journey.
That's awesome. And there's another really good practical that you mentioned, Anna, and sort of that last segment around, it's a really practical thing that people can take away and use out there, which is, you know, go talk to 10 people and ask them the 5 things, the 5 words that, how, if they were reflecting on you, what would be the 5 words they would use, and accumulate that together and see what the common threads are. I mean, what a simple but effective 360 kind of review type exercise to really start to just open that up for you. You know, we want people to be able to sort of listen to this and take a couple of really practical things away that they can go and start tomorrow or today to go on that journey.
And I think on that one, I would encourage people to look at their relationship with the word yes. Like when stuff comes in and their relationship with busy, it's like, you know, when people go, how are you? And I do this all the time. I'm busy. Like, it's like, so like if we're constantly saying yes, and we're like, get curious about why. Like, there's a line that a therapist used with me. I talk a lot about therapists. I don't have that. I do have a fair bit of therapy, but which was we're human beings, not human doings. But we're conditioned to do. And I, like, back to what I was saying earlier, this kind of time for reflection, this space, this when someone asks you to do something, take a breath. Like, okay, is this what I need to be spending my time on right now? I think that is one of the fundamental differences between, like, good and great. Is, like, our real understanding of our time, our energy is the only thing we really have. Like, how do we use it to serve us best?
Because when
especially in this work, like where we're trying to make a difference.
Because when you think about it in a really practical way, you can't, there's a finite capacity that we all have. So you can't just keep loading up the basket, because eventually it'll just overflow and things will get dropped. And so I think you're really onto something there around, great leaders have a really innate ability to kind of really prioritize and focus their time and their effort and their emotion and their passion where it can really make the biggest impact, and feel comfortable to delegate and divulge some of the other things that they don't need to hold on to.
Yeah, I often use the analogy of an orchestra. Like, if you think about, we start off playing an instrument and then we run a section and then we sit in that kind of conductor role. Yeah. And actually what we're doing is we're the one that's creating space, looking at the overarching symphony of something. Yeah. We're interacting with the audience. We're thinking about actually how do you build it. That is the role of a leader to me. You can't just nip in and start playing the violin. I don't know enough instruments, but the trumpet's not great today, I'm going to go and play the trumpet. It's your ability to sit at that level. Yeah. But all of our credibility, all of our validation, all of our success has come from the doing rather than the being. Yep. So I think that's a big shift that people need to think about.
Liam, what do you think are some attributes that separate out good leaders or great leaders from good leaders, particularly in not necessarily just in safety, but in safety as well? If you think about a couple of people who you thought were just really inspired you or just really impressive, what were the characteristics that they had?
I go back to showing up. I think, as a great leader, for me, where once you prioritize, once you acknowledge where you can deliver your energy in that space, and you really show up, that goes a long way. It's a ripple effect. If you show up and you're giving your all, sometimes it might not, it might not end where you need it to end, in terms of performance, but if you do show up on the 9 times out of 10, you'll get a lot of people on board with you as well in terms of that journey. I think that for me, that is the number one, is to be able to understand what energy I can give, and then when you understand where that energy is going to go, really show up and give it 110%.
Brilliant. The next kind of concept I want to delve into a little bit, and I think it ties into what makes great leaders as compared to good leaders, is that I think a lot of the research and literature suggests that trust in leadership is a really critical attribute to unlocking organisational performance and unlocking people's capability. Do you want to talk to us a little about the trust equation?
It's my fave, absolute fave.
Beautiful. So maybe to introduce the trust equation and then start to unpack it a little bit for us.
Yeah, so I came across this work, a few years ago, working with a construction company actually, and I think it really helped. Trust is really subjective, right? It's like, I trust someone, I don't, and people often can't put their finger on it. So the trust equation is a piece of work that I can't remember who it's attributed to, but you can Google it. Great. But thank you is what we're saying. So on the top line is credibility, so you know what you're talking about. Yep. Plus reliability, you do what you say. Yep. Plus intimacy, so you've got that kind of human to human connection. Yep. But all of those three things can be divisible by self-orientation. So is someone in it for themselves, or are they in it for the collective? Yep. And I use it often as a framework when trust isn't present, when we've got a bit of friction in a relationship. Yep. I also get people to think about it in terms of how they build relationships over time. And sometimes it can feel a bit insincere thinking about how I build a relationship. How do I build trust? Yep. But let's get real, it's part of the job, right?
Key.
Yeah, and you've only got a finite amount of time. You've got to really think about where you pay that attention. So for people that are really critical to the change that you're trying to create within an organisation, you really need to build that trust. Yep. So I think it's a really nice starting point for people to get curious. I think the things that I've observed with it is when we go into work in safety, we often go in on our agenda, the work of safety, here's what I think.
I need you to do all these things,
Instantly, the self-orientation is I rather than we. It erodes rather than builds trust. And I think the other thing I've observed is what sits above that line that you hold dear. So, for example, intimacy is really important to me. I really like to get to know people. That's how I build connection. Yep. If someone's really guarded, and that's just different, it's not better or worse, it's just different, I will start to tell myself a story about their self-orientation. Yep. And with safety professionals, this kind of credibility part, because expertise has been such a core part of this profession, when someone doesn't show up with knowledge, we start to doubt Like, can we trust them?
Yep.
So I think it's a really good tool for just a bit of introspection around what leads me to trust people,
Yep.
what leads me not to, but recognizing so much of it is story, not fact.
Yep.
And so much is about what's important to us.
Yep.
And this piece of work that I keep coming back to at the moment with clients is it's just different. It's not better. Often when we meet difference, maybe someone loves numbers and we love people.
Yep.
It's not they're wrong, I'm right. It's just different.
Yep.
And we need to, and cultures, multi-cultures, like different cultures show up in different ways.
Yep.
Getting curious about that and recognizing it's different.
Yep.
And recognizing what we're bringing to those relationships. That's kind of my play with the trust equation.
Gold. And it goes, you mentioned you're using it to think about how you trust or don't trust people, but equally you can flip it around the other way, around how am I representing myself with people and relationships and in terms of building trust, you know.
So am I showing that credibility, which tends to be the thing we
go with, lead with.
Am I actually being reliable? Am I actually doing what I say I do? Do I have that integrity? And am I actually spending time getting to know people?
Yep.
Like, we don't put that on the to-do list.
Yep.
The amount of times I work with individuals and with teams, and I'm like, you've got this I've got to audit this place, do this policy, this process. Whereas I need to just go and have a coffee with.
Yep.
I need to ask this person questions about, like, how are they doing? What's important to them right now?
Yep.
We don't give it the same weight.
How much? I mean, that's the thing that's springing into my mind is around the whole, you know, remote work that just accelerated rapidly. And how much do you think that's eroded the trust equation, particularly around that intimacy issue? Because we've got a lot less human relationships in our day-to-day work than we used to, right?
Yeah, we have to get really conscious and really intentional about it. We have to create little micro moments.
Yep.
We have to probably be quite upfront about it.
Yep.
Like, you know, I observe teams go into meetings and it's straight into the work.
Yep.
So when I bring teams together, which I'm often lucky enough to do, we spend so much time just getting them to know each other because they've not done it. You know, they've been working together for like 4 or 5 years, and it's like, I didn't know you had kids.
I didn't know
and
you were
like,
7 foot tall.
Yeah, you were not sure in real life. But it is like, we think it's a luxury, we think it's a nice to have, and I keep coming back to, like, it's mission critical. Like, if you want to make a difference, if you want to drive change, this is the stuff you need to invest time in.
There we go, folks. You heard it right there. Trust equation. Understand it, unpack it, apply it to yourself, and also to the relationships that you have around your level of trust towards those people and why. The why is the key part to that, right?
Yeah.
Any comments on that, Liam, from your perspective?
I think just, you know, on that point around understanding people, you said it right, we do not take 5 minutes at the beginning of meetings naturally or generally to just, how did you
check in?
Check in. What did you do this weekend? You know, then 3 years down the line, you find out you had kids or you got a nice tan. But in theory, you should, if you was, you know, expressing that within a group, you know, regularly, you'd understand that they're going on holiday, they're doing this with their family, or we had this trouble this week. And I think that's really, really important because it just breaks down them little barriers them little barriers lead to success. And just trying to get a little bit more intimate with key stakeholders who sometimes, as we're all so busy, it's really, really difficult to prioritise. Yeah. So just trying to take those 5 minutes will create so much space, I think, in the future.
Brilliant. I mean, there's some, you know, some gold dust in there in terms of perspective for people out there who may be sitting there who have had some challenges around trying to get the influence at the table that they're trying to get that influence around, or some of the relationships at work might be struggling, maybe weren't as strong as they used to be, things like that. And there's some, you know, some absolute, you know, gold in those points that you've both made there. So that's awesome.
I can't remember, but I'm going to ask Anna because I'm sure she will. What's the heat?
Hot to cold. So
yes,
when I used to work in recruitment, we used to train people to do business development, right? So it's in that purest BD sales environment, and we used to take our prospective clients or our existing clients, we used to put them on a scale of cold to hot.
Yep.
So cold, they didn't know exist, and hot is
ready to buy.
Like just would trust us, like whatever we say, we've got that real trusted advisor kind of relationship, for want of a less salesy term. And what we used to what I used to train people was, like, think about, like, every time you interact with someone, you have an opportunity to be like 1 degree warmer with every interaction. Yep. But when you stop spending time with people, they get colder.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we have one of these relationships where it is a bit tense or we're not getting progress, what we tend to do is, just go and find someone else that we like. Yeah. And actually they're the ones, and it can be, and this is where, you know, being in offices is great, but sometimes you've got to really think about, okay, how am I going to interact? How am I going to be on that person's agenda, not just mine?
Yeah.
How do I bring them into the work I'm doing? And for me, it's a really visual aid of almost like, how am I moving and holding people constantly and thinking about like building those relationships, warming people up. Because when you've got to have that difficult conversation, or when you have to hold the line, or when you need to ask for someone, have you got credit in the bank?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
This is a golden nugget. I think for me, I've used this so recently, so many times. And trying to think of that analogy in my brain is to think, okay, I need to go and have this difficult conversation. How am I going to deal with that? You know, where am I on the hot to cold scale at the moment with this individual?
Yep.
How do I get to there so that we can have that difficult conversation if we need to? And I just think it's a really important piece.
All right, so we've talked a lot about self-awareness, and we've talked a lot about some of the exercises and practical things you can do to start to really discover a deeper self-awareness of yourself and how that can impact your positioning and your development as a leader. How do you know you're making progress? Because sometimes, just my own lived experience, it can feel pretty lonely. And sometimes it's hard to know if you're actually making progress to the North Star. What would your perspective be on that, Anna?
So there's a couple of things. I bake this into kind of the programs that I run. We do an impact session at the end. Yeah. And I think that's become a really important step, because often we're so focused on where we're going next that we don't see how far we've come. Yes. And I think it's really important in terms of like just giving your like brain evidence that you can make change, that you can do things differently. So that feels like a really nice opportunity. And I think you don't need a coach to do that. You can have your own impact session. I set out to do this, and like, what feels different? Like, how am I behaving differently? Back to that feedback loop. Yep. I've been working on this year. What have you seen? I think is a really lovely place to play. I think if I think about my own developmental journey, especially like the deep-rooted stuff, it's when something happens, what do I feel? What do I think? How quickly can I get myself out? And I'm talking about something that would...
adversity.
Or like I have a difficult conversation, or someone sends me an email and I read it in that way where I'm like, you know... And then I can go, okay, like we've all been there, right? Yeah. Like we've all got
Absolutely.
them. And I will just be like, okay, right, take a breath. And I've got mechanisms now that I can work through. It doesn't mean I don't feel all the things that I used to, but it's kind of my bounce back is shorter. And I think that's what when it comes to impact, making a difference, what I'm honest with people about is that sometimes you'll feel like you're making so much progress, and then the context will change, or something will change, maybe something in your health, maybe something outside, and the game's completely up in the air again. And you've got to be kind to yourself about, okay, it's my ability to come back to it. It's a bit like if you're deep into a running, like training for a marathon, and you have a couple of bad weeks, how quickly do you get back on track? And that's what I look at, it's kind of my bounce back, it's my get back on track time.
Oh, nice.
And I think that's like shortening that is something that I'm really curious about. How do I still go through all the feelings, all the emotions, but I have processes
a bit faster. And that takes a real degree of being really plugged into yourself, right, to understand what they are in the first place for a lot of folks, and then being able to notice the difference each time over a long period of time, and then being able to kind of give yourself a bit of credit for that. Like, I'm like, I adulted my way through that thing, like that's okay. I think, and sometimes I'll be really kind to myself if I don't. That's also okay. But I think making sure you create space and time to think about, I was there, I am here. We get people in a coaching world to, like, if that was where you are, like were and where you are, we get them to stand where they think they are, and then we get them to look back. And I think that's a really nice exercise to see how far you've come with something. I create time for teams like this all the time, which is, okay, talk to us about the year. What have you achieved? What's been difficult? What have you overcome? And I think too often we just go next. I had a mentor of mine from when I was about 14, and had a massive impact on my life. This guy's no longer with us, and he had a saying. He had a career as an executive in a big international company, And he'd recognised some talent in me, and he had this statement. He said every time I saw him, he said, "Nathan, jet pilots don't have review mirrors." And for a good chunk of my early developmental years, that was just like, go, next thing. But then over time, I started to build a bad habit of actually not having review mirrors, and actually you don't celebrate sometimes the successes and the wins that you had along the way. So that, that really resonates with me, that kind of that notion of like stopping and actually just having a bit of perspective on where you've been and where you are and where you're going, because I think it's such a critical perspective.
Yeah, and I'll often get people to, like when they come in and they're like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, I'm terrified of doing it. I'll get them to kind of revisit the things that they felt like that before.
Yep.
Because I think sometimes we need to prove to ourselves that we can do it. Like we've been uncomfortable, out of our depth, overwhelmed previously.
Yep.
And it turns out we've got out of that. So just giving them kind of hope and a little bit of like perspective on it is really important.
Liam, you had a comment?
No, I was just going to say, I was thinking about what was coming out there in terms of, taking your foot off the pedal. I think he's tough to do that sometimes, because you get tunnel vision. That's where I need to get to. And think pacing that change and pacing them goals is really, really important. For me, I set goals, but I think they need to be measured.
Yep.
And is that possible with the tools that I've got in my toolkit right now? Or throughout that journey, do I need to add this? Do I need to add that? And I think as I'm going through and still going through the coaching, journey as well, I don't think you'll ever get away from that, because we're all wanting to improve and, progress. I think just having that self-reflection to think, okay, I did that good last week. There may be a bit of a bump in the road, but I can get there in another couple of weeks. We don't need to be afraid to acknowledge that and take that on board.
I mean, that's a really, really valuable perspective, because, leadership, and I'm early on the journey, but what I could reflect on is that it ain't a linear journey at all, right? You feel like you make some progress, then you get sort of knocked back a couple of pegs. Things happen, adversity, things that happen in life, and then you realise you weren't quite as you didn't have the mastery of that thing that you thought you did, and then so back you come, and it's a sort of wavy line that sort of loosely starts to sort of increase over time. Would that be fair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do this for a living, right? And the amount of times that I sit there and I might have had like a really difficult day, difficult week, difficult month. And that's where I really have to, again, be kind to myself, to be like, I'm not here to tell anyone I'm perfect, because I'm like, the practice is very much alive in me. But it's recognizing that, like, with any kind of growth, any kind of change, it is a practice, it's an experiment, it's an evolution. And that's kind of also the fun of it. Like if we're all just sat around stagnant.
Yeah, how boring.
Exactly. So it's kind of finding that space between like enjoyment and discomfort. I think if it's not terrifying you, then it's,
too easy.
Yeah, probably. And I think that's the part, but everything we went back to earlier around capacity, being kind to yourself, but recognizing it's not linear and it's not finite. There's no silver bullets in this, unfortunately.
No, lots of hard work.
But you can't be at full capacity all the time.
No.
That is, I think for me, that's one of the learnings I'm dealing with, is that it's okay. You don't need to be 100 mile an hour every single day. And I think that's really important, is just to figure out what that sweet spot is for you. Because that will have impact as well on your team. If you feel like you're burning out all the time and you're driving the team to burn out, that's going to have the negative impact, not just through them, but also into their teams as well. So I think trying to be understanding the alignment, where that sweet spot is, and the fine balance to what can we get over the line now, or what's for in the future, I think is...
It's almost like thinking about leadership like a muscle. You need to exercise it and you need to stress it to allow it to adapt and grow, but equally you need to allow it time to recover, so that adaptation can happen during recovery, so you come back stronger.
Back to that, yeah.
All right, quick fire round. Let's get into we're nearly there. We've been a really, really awesome conversation on exploring these dimensions around self-awareness and applying that, and trust equation and influencing people and all this sort of good stuff. If you think about yourself 20 years ago, based on what you know now, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give yourself 20 years ago?
Do you want me to go first?
Go on then.
And it's good, like, keep mentioning go and get some therapy.
Preload.
Yeah, like, go and work out some of the stuff that because I think I didn't, and it's not necessarily therapy, it's just really understand these kind of core beliefs you have about yourself. Yeah. And I think as soon as I started to learn about them and recognize I could change them, it was a game changer for me.
Yep.
So I wish I'd had that in my locker. The whole concept of like my reaction to something is based on my beliefs.
Yes.
It's not reality.
Yep.
Like the whole world of cognitive behavioral therapy.
It's a conditioner that's going through.
That's like, I wish I'd had that in my wheelhouse earlier.
Yeah, it's a great one. You know, if only you had a recorder of the first 18 years of your life that told you all of the things that impacted you and formed those attitudes, values and beliefs that are within all of us.
Yeah.
But we all struggle to tap into them. You know, some people never tap into them. And it's a bit of a journey. But imagine if you had that and you could see it really clearly. Here you go, you're 18, here's who you are. You know, what a wonderful gift that would be.
And you get
Magic.
to play with that. Like, you don't, like, you're not written for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Like, that was the bit.
That's your starting point. Yeah, that's gold. Love it. Maybe we should invent that little machine.
If you would.
I think I said it earlier. I think accepting that I don't know everything. You know, if you can get to grips with that and leverage it to the best of your ability, that's going to give you so much superpower.
Yep.
You know, knowing who to trigger,
yep.
Who's got that knowledge. Okay, let's go and ask. You know, having the ability to understand others around you. What are their superpowers? Leverage that, and then hopefully that elevates you as well.
Love it. All right, next question. Who's the leader that's giving you the most inspiration that you look up to and think, you know, that person's just really influenced me or inspired me?
You go first.
Hopefully people know. I'm expecting people to know. I think as a Man United fan, I look at Roy Keane as the ultimate leader.
Yep.
You know, he shown up, he was consistent, he was passionate, and still today he's passionate and he shows up all the time. I think looking at that style of leadership, I think that's where that's what I look up to. Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. Anna, what about you? Most inspiring leader or leaders?
Yeah, I think I struggle to find just one. Yep. I see it more as like a buffet. I like to pick different things from different people. Yep. So, like someone like Jacinda Ardern, I'm seeing her live in a couple of weeks, and I think her leadership, her authenticity is, as a woman, really inspiring. How do you turn up with heart in a environment where that's probably been quite unacceptable? I admire a lot of people in the world of sport that really think about not just like from a coaching perspective, not just like being good at the thing, but actually what it takes to be good at the thing. Yep. And then I have some people that I interact with on a daily basis that are in the safety world that I am really inspired by. People like Ruth Denyer over at Netflix, her ability to like think creatively around a problem, meet people with heart. Crystal, who you obviously know, who I had the joy of coaching, which blows my mind.
Who has featured on this very podcast.
But again, that lead with like authenticity and heart, that can have the difficult conversations, but also be like really humble and really lead with care. Like, I think that to me is what's really inspiring.
All right, Liam, what's the best piece of leadership advice you've ever received, do you think? Can you pinpoint something?
Yeah, there's quite a few actually. The one that I pick out is the person who I got this from was around presence. Yep. So presence matters more than position. Yep. And I think in leadership roles, whether it's safety or not, I think that visibility, that credibility, you know, being there with your team, with your colleagues, whoever it may be, and just having that presence to listen, understand, matters really, really, really importantly to individuals and humans. So that's the piece of advice that I take away.
Presence over position. Love it. Anna?
You can't be curious if you're furious.
Oh, on fire.
I know. It is, because I band around the word curiosity,
Yep.
like anyone. And I like, it's big for me, like
Yep.
really seeking to understand.
Yep.
But sometimes I have to remember, like, if I'm curious about something, there's no way I'm curious. And
Questions tend to load up a bit more.
yeah, and like, am I really listening and seeking? And I think that for me is like, if I'm feeling a lot,
Yep.
I've stopped really trying to understand the other person.
So you're sort of tapping into the whole seek first to understand, then
Yeah.
seek to be understood type mantra,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, awesome. All right. If you had to finish the sentence, the last question to wrap things up, if I said finish the sentence, a self-aware leader is someone who, Anna?
A self-aware leader is someone that recognises that they see the world through a lens, and that lens is formed over the last, like, whatever many years of their life, and that they have the ability to evolve and change that lens.
Brilliant. Love it. Liam?
Accept vulnerability and don't be afraid of failure.
Brilliant. Awesome. Good wisdom. Nice. That's the wisdom in the war stories. All right, so to wrap things up, it's been an amazing. Thanks for coming in and being on the app. It's been an awesome conversation. There's some real practical takeaways for our listeners out there. Quite a few actually that people can take away and really apply on day one. Just to wrap it up, if you were going to give people advice around if they were going to go do something today or tomorrow to get started on the self-awareness discovery journey, to tap into all of that sort of internal stuff, what can they do today or tomorrow?
Two things: go and get the feedback.
Yep.
Go and ask.
Feedback.
Go and ask.
Yep.
And then get really curious about what is the fact, what are the stories, because in those stories you'll learn a whole load about what's important to you and how you see the world.
Love it. Liam?
I'll do two then. Figure out what you want, what you in it for.
Yep.
And then the second bit is around reflecting day to day, week to week.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks for coming on. It's been a really good session. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a good conversation. I'm sure people out there will be listening and take away a lot of great gold nuggets they can apply. Well done.
Thank you for having us.